My friends, it's getting real. Here you can see an exclusive picture of the training in Poland of a new brigade manned for combat operations in Ukraine. This means we could have Poland going in before GTA 6.
That escalated quickly.
Now, thousands of volunteers are carrying intense drills to take Russian positions by storm. In this picture, we see half a squad of 6 men and their instructor on the right, training for what seems to be house-to-house fighting. It is reported that the Volunteer Legion will be trained in Lublin, a town located southeast of Poland, 75 kilometers away from the border with Ukraine. Some believe this brigade will form the spearhead of Ukraine's 2025 offensive. Are we surprised though? Poland is one of the countries that transferred the most military equipment to Ukraine. And we also all remember how in May 2024, Poland's Foreign Minister Sikorski stated that Poland won't rule out sending troops to Ukraine. On the 8th of July, Poland signed a security agreement with Ukraine. And to wrap everything up, here on the 2nd of September from the Financial Times, Poland has duty to shoot down Russian missiles over Ukraine.
A few moments later.
The reason for all this is simple. The current reality is that the frontline situation for our beloved Ukrainskaya Armia is critical. Russian forces keep making territorial gains in Donbass, and Ukraine's lack of manpower and trained military personnel is becoming a real problem. Despite the large mobilization campaign across the country in spring, Deutsche Welle reported, Ukraine lacks soldiers, a legion will be created in Poland. As a reminder, in 2009, Lithuania, Poland and Ukraine formed a trinational brigade. And this Lithuanian-Polish-Ukrainian brigade has been combat operational since 2016. Let's be honest, its mission has always been to counter threat coming from the east. However, as you can imagine, it is currently impossible to deploy such a formation to Ukraine due to the risk of escalation. So what else can Poland do to help Ukraine win the war? In response, the aim was to encourage men that fled Ukraine to voluntarily join the ranks of the armed forces. The Polish Foreign Minister Sikorski stated, "In Poland, we're starting to prepare the first Ukrainian brigade of volunteers." That's right, this new legion will be formed by Ukrainian refugees living in Poland, and that on a voluntary basis. Allegedly, thousands of Ukrainians living in Poland have already registered to join this Ukrainian Legion. So in this video, we will analyze the purpose of this Ukrainian Legion, we will go through the recruitment process, NATO training they're supposed to get, and overall, what we can expect from this new formation. Due to the complex nature of this conflict, I used this app and website by Ground News for my research. While browsing, I found this story. Fire rages at oil depot in Russia's Rostov after Ukraine drone attack. Ground News has found 68 articles covering the story, with a near even split of coverage coming from the left, center, and the right. But how each side is reporting on it is where it gets interesting. Overall, the bias distribution leans 37% to the right. When I click on bias comparison, everything is conveniently summarized for me. The left emphasizes Ukraine's continued drone attacks on Russian energy infrastructure, presenting a broader conflict narrative, while the center and the right highlights the details of the strike and the impact on Russian military logistics. With the Ground News, you can also dive deeper beyond their political bias and see how credible the articles are and who funds them. For this particular story, only 4% of the sources are rated as low factuality. This is great news for my research. This could be due to the wide array of ownership, with 22% of the reporting outlets marked as coming from independent news. Unsurprisingly, 30% of the sources were sponsored by government-affiliated agencies. For example, here from lenta.ru, which is backed by the Russian government, they stated, "The AFU attack on the Kirov region details consequences attack on an oil depot." This article draws attention to the foreign attack on the Russian homeland. Meanwhile, Deutsche Welle, which is affiliated to the German government, reported, "Ukrainian drone attack oil depot in Rostov," emphasizing the actual attack and the risk of a nuclear accident. It's not a surprise that this last article is rated as highly factual with no specific left or right leaning bias. Personally, as someone fascinated by warfare and geopolitics, ground news is an invaluable tool that cuts through the noise. After offering a 40% discount last time, I'm thrilled to announce an exclusive 50% discount for my audience this time around. It's Ground News's way of showing appreciation for all your support. Go to ground.news/HistoryLegends or use the link in the video description below to subscribe today. If you sign up through my link or scan my QR code, you'll get an exclusive 50% off the Vantage plan, which is what I use to get unlimited access to all their features. I think Ground News is doing important work, and I hope you'll check them out. Not only will you support the headquarters, but you'll also support a small team looking to hold the media accountable. The European Union's military assistance mission to Ukraine officially started in the fall of 2022. The mission was established to improve the capabilities and expertise of the armed forces of Ukraine by providing its soldiers with basic training and getting them through various specialization courses. To make this process as safe and efficient as possible, this entire training mission took place on EU soil. In parallel, the UK led its own training mission called Operation Interflex. As of the summer of 2024, the UK trained over 30,000 Ukrainian soldiers, followed by Poland with roughly 20,000 recruits. Another 10,000 received military training in Germany and about the same number in France. Meanwhile, both Spain and the Czech Republic have trained over 4,000 Ukrainian soldiers on their territory. Overall, we're speaking of about 75,000 to 80,000 Ukrainian soldiers that went through some sort of NATO training since 2022. And we're not only talking about riflemen and basic training, but also more specialized and technical courses, meant for tank crews, engineering units, and artillery batteries. The main problem was the training of the infantry. Turns out, NATO instructors that have never seen combat providing green recruits with 2 or 3 months of basic training and then sending them off piecemeal to Ukraine has not proven to be very efficient. On top of that, the majority of them were forcefully mobilized personnel whose morale is pretty low, compared to other formations like Azov that only takes in volunteers. In this interview by French national TV, this French military instructor said that some of his Ukrainian recruits were determined to fight, but that many of the younger ones, aged between 21 and 23 years old, are not as motivated, and they just want the war to end. Oh yeah, talking about France. We all remember President Macron's crazy idea of deploying troops to Ukraine. The next brilliant idea was to send French military personnel to Ukraine to train Ukrainian recruits. More specifically, train and equip a brigade-sized unit of 4,500 Ukrainian soldiers somewhere in the west of the country. Obviously, such an alternative would unnecessarily expose French military personnel to Russian missile strikes and create all sorts of international tensions for a training mission that is already being carried out peacefully across the European Union. So on the 31st of May, the Polish foreign minister said that although Warsaw considered deploying military instructors to Ukraine, the Polish military came to the conclusion that it would be both safer and more effective to train a unit formed of Ukrainian refugees living in Poland. You know what? That could actually be a game changer in this war, and you'll understand why in a minute. Here from Military Land, new mechanized brigades begin the process of formation. The 160th series of mechanized brigades will be formed abroad, with the first one being the 160th Mechanized Brigade, aka the Ukrainian Legion. To truly understand all this, we have to take a step back and look at Ukraine's shortage of manpower. Here from Reuters, Ukraine battles its demography to find sufficient soldiers. In response, Ukraine ramped up its mobilization efforts with the aim of adding 500,000 men into the armed forces. In April, Ukraine even lowered its conscription age to 25 to replenish its ranks. However, just like the New York Times reported, Ukraine is conscripting thousands more troops. But are they ready? Training 500,000 men would require thousands of instructors and support units to be pulled out of the front just to train all these new recruits. And now we understand the purpose of the European Union's military assistance mission. With that being said, that's not the biggest problem. The main challenge for the country is that many Ukrainian men bribe their way out of the country to avoid being mobilized. And that despite martial law preventing any fighting age male between 18 and 60 to leave the country. Here Radio Canada wrote, "They don't want to die. Ukrainians flee to avoid conscription." I mean, I'm not in a position to judge. But from an external perspective, the problem is that what benefits each one of them individually puts the entire nation at risk. When you have a small country fighting a bigger one, you need everyone in the small country to mobilize and gather their forces to win the war. Otherwise, it's GG well played. What's the point? Doesn't it hurt them to see their country disappear while they sip cocktails on the beach? Why should the men on the front keep fighting for this idea of a Ukrainian nation if so many people are abandoning ship?
Both men say they like their lives in Prague, but would prefer to return to Ukraine only when the war is over.
In November 2023, the BBC reported that 600,000 Ukrainian men fled abroad. By early spring 2024, Texty.org estimated 812,000 men aged 18 to 64 that received temporary protection in EU countries. If we take into account those that escaped to North America, Dubai Oblast, and the rest of the world, we were looking at about 1 million men. Can you imagine that? 1 million! However, with Ukraine's latest mobilization campaign, that number skyrocketed to an estimated 1.5 to 2 million men that now reside outside the country, and therefore cannot be drafted into the armed forces. I mean, one of them even became a famous YouTuber. Why would he even return? Due to this immigration crisis, the former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine stated, "Staying abroad does not relieve a citizen of his or her duties." And in a way, he's right. With the new mobilization bill passed by the Ukrainian parliament, men aged 18 to 60 that live abroad will lose all administrative services. This means they will not be able to renew their passports, unless they have their military registration documents in order. And to do so, they have to show up in person in Ukraine. There was this story in the Globe and Mail of a Ukrainian teenager called Mikita Zaharchenko. He was 16 in 2022 when he escaped Ukraine to Canada with his mother. But now he's 18 and his Ukrainian passport will expire in the summer. Meanwhile, he said, "I just want to be safe. I have a new life. But I always want to go back to Ukraine and visit. As a tourist." Cute story, bro. His mom is extremely angry. She says it's not fair. What about all the men that were too poor to bribe their way out of the military? For 2 years now, entire families were torn apart as fathers, husbands, brothers, and sons were forcefully conscripted and sent right to the trenches. Yet, most of them just accepted their fate as this was their duty to the nation.
Putin Vladimir Vladimirovich is attack our country, and what we have to do? We have only to defend our home.
I think this is the right thing to do. Look how long they've been on our land. You can't just sit there while they're capturing our territory. What will we do then? Will we become their slaves?
According to an article by Radio Canada, Kiev estimates that there are 300,000 males in age to fight in Poland. That's almost the amount of troops Ukraine has currently deployed on the front. If just a fraction of all these guys signed up for this Ukrainian Legion, it would be a real game changer, especially if they apply this rule to all Ukrainian refugees across Europe.
According to the Czech government, some 94,000 combat-age Ukrainian men have temporary protection status in the country.
One of the common complaints of those that fled abroad is that they won't serve because they will be sent to the front without training and just be used as cannon fodder. Sadly, they're not necessarily wrong. This happened a lot in the Ukrainian army, and we covered many such stories in my past videos. Poland called them on it. The Polish government stated that volunteers joining this Ukrainian Legion will be enlisted into the Ukrainian armed forces and will receive basic training on Polish soil, conducted by the Polish armed forces, meaning they will not be sent to the front with only 2 weeks of training. They will only be sent to Ukraine once their Polish instructors consider them fit for combat. On top of that, although they will be deployed in Ukraine for rotations, their garrison will be in Poland, where they benefit from improved facilities and where they're safe from Russian missile strikes. The Polish government also emphasized that Ukrainian servicemen will have the right to return to Poland after the war, because it is also important that after their military service, they can return to where they left their families. Now, what is the excuse of all these Ukrainian men living in Poland? They either show up to the recruitment office, or they have to admit that they're just cowards who have abandoned their homeland. I know I'm harsh, but it's the reality. The good news is that according to the Polish Foreign Minister Sikorski, thousands of volunteers have already registered for this Ukrainian Legion. If just 1% of all these Ukrainian men living in Poland register and enlist, it should be more than enough to form the 2,000-strong 160th Mechanized Brigade. Now imagine if 5% of them are brave enough to volunteer. Then Ukraine could have an additional 5 mechanized brigades. With that being said, it's one thing to get thousands of troops, but they will also need hundreds of vehicles to be combat operational. Now that they have recruited thousands of people, the next step is to train them. As the saying goes, green but ready. It will not be a difficult task since Poland already trained over 20,000 Ukrainian recruits. Reportedly, the Ukrainian Legion will be trained in the town of Lublin. According to this map of the structure of the Polish land forces, Lublin is the home base of the 19th Mechanized Brigade of the Polish Army, one of the country's newest formations since it reached operational capability in 2022. There's also a lot of symbolism associated with the home base of the Ukrainian Legion. On top of being the garrison city of the 19th Mechanized Brigade, it's also the one of the Lithuanian Polish-Ukrainian Brigade. And from a historical perspective, Lublin was where in 1569 a pact united the Kingdom of Poland and the Grand Duchy of Lithuania into a single state. Lublin is also from where the Polish Fifth Army flanked the Red Army and saved the country over 100 years ago during the 1920 Battle of Warsaw. Oh yeah, talking about this, on the 15th of August, Polish President Duda honored the 15,000 Ukrainian soldiers that helped turn the tide against the Soviets in that crucial year of 1920. Now, I'm not going to go into the details of Simon Petlura's army because Polish-Ukrainian relations are very complex and out of the scope of this video. We see how Poland is clearly pushing this narrative of friendship between the two countries with the creation of this Ukrainian Legion. Back to modern day, this Lithuanian Polish-Ukrainian Brigade has been combat operational since 2016, when they participated in the NATO training exercise Brave Band. The theoretical strength of this Litpolukrbrig is 4,500, with 1 battalion from each country. However, as you can imagine, the Ukrainian 1st Air Assault Battalion, part of this brigade, left the pierogies on the table, as it was quickly called back home in February 2022. All this to say that the HQ of this Trinational Brigade is located in Lublin and they now can finally be useful. How about we dive deeper into the actual training that the men from this Ukrainian Legion will go through? Here we see combat arms training taking place somewhere in Poland, with Ukrainian soldiers practicing an assault aboard Soviet-era BMP-1 infantry fighting vehicles. In this video by the German Bundeswehr, we see a set of fortifications and Ukrainian recruits practicing the storming of trenches. While the instructors guide them, the recruits learn how to clear enemy positions step by step. These wooden beams are added to make sure the troops understand to keep their head down as they progress through the trenches. At last, instructors teach binoms how to cover each other as they advance through this maze. From what I see here, most of the training only consists of platoon-sized exercises, with the emphasis on how to maneuver fire teams and squads across trenches. Maybe if they're lucky, they're going to maneuver one platoon with another, but I fear it's never going to go above this level. On paper, it all looks good. However, what this German instructor said here is very important. He said the training is starting with individual soldiers and up to the company level. This highlights a major issue with the EU training mission. Ukrainian recruits are trained in batches of 100 men for a couple weeks before being sent off to the front. Meanwhile, there appears to be little focus on training or developing the skills of their officers. As a result, you end up with properly trained soldiers commanded by underprepared leadership, essentially lions led by donkeys. Countless reports mention how Ukrainian company commanders are not adequately trained to coordinate maneuvers with other companies. And the problem is even worse at the battalion level. Essentially, Ukrainian battalion commanders only care about their designated sector, and everything else is not their problem. And oftentimes they lie in their reports in order to avoid being sanctioned for bad management. And this is exactly what we're witnessing in the Pokrovsk direction. Therefore, it is of utmost importance to build an entire brigade from the ground up, and by training all its subcomponents together. This includes ensuring that officers are familiar with one another and have the opportunity to practice combat operations as a unified force. Such cohesion fosters trust, improves coordination, and enhances the overall effectiveness of the brigade in real combat situations. With that being said, this is exactly what NATO tried to do with the 47th Mechanized Brigade, and let's just say that, yeah. We can also cover the equipment that will be provided to this Ukrainian Legion. For example, here we see Ukrainian soldiers being trained in Germany with the German-made Heckler & Koch G36 assault rifle. We can even see them use some Panzerfaust 3 anti-tank weapons. Regarding this topic, I talked with a foreign volunteer fighting with Ukraine, and he said the following: "I'm afraid they might have similar problems to the units sent for training abroad before them. They might be trained on Western small arms, and once they're sent to Donbass, they're handed AKs and various Soviet-type weapons." So ideally, the recruits of this Polish Legion should be equipped with Polish equipment from head to toe, and keep all their gear as they're deployed to the front. For small arms, they could be using the Polish 5.56 FB Beryl assault rifle. Another option could be the MSBS Grot, which has both a conventional assault rifle configuration and a bullpup configuration. As for general purpose machine guns, they could be trained with Polish-made UK M2000s or the famous American M240. Although this idea seems great in theory, the foreign volunteer suggested the following idea. They should be trained on platforms they will use in Ukraine. No need to know the M240, M249, the MG3, MG5 or others if you will never use them. It would not be too hard to pull off, since Poland still has 300,000 Soviet-era AKs in storage as well as 10,000 PKM machine guns, which could directly be handed over to the soldiers of the brigades of the Ukrainian Legion. As an example of what could be done, we have to look at what the French are cooking. France trained over 10,000 Ukrainian soldiers since the start of the war, like these men you can see on screen. That could explain why we saw some Ukrainian troops using the nostalgic FAMAS on the front line. In many instances, I noticed that the bulk of the training is way too short. In this reportage by French national TV, they explain how these Ukrainian snipers will go through an express training of 2 weeks with their French instructors. I mean, granted, this is a specialized course, but still. From now on, Ukrainian recruits should at least get 90 days of training on EU soil before being sent back to Ukraine. Problem number 2 is what we described earlier: the overemphasis on small unit tactics. So to solve the problem, France decided to form a full-fledged brigade for the armed forces of Ukraine by training 2,100 Ukrainian servicemen this year by providing them with uniforms and all the necessary armament. This brigade will be equipped with 128 VAB armored personnel carriers, 18 Caesar self-propelled howitzers, and 24 AMX-10 RC light tanks. Paris will also hand over trucks, anti-tank guided missiles, and radars. You see, now we're talking, it's getting somewhere. Essentially, France will create a French mechanized brigade manned by Ukrainians. The objective is to have this brigade combat ready by December 2024. The reason why I'm telling you this is because this Ukrainian Legion being formed in Poland could follow a similar model. They could be equipped and trained just like a Polish mechanized brigade would be. To do so, let's analyze the 19th Mechanized Brigade from Lublin. This brigade includes 1 reconnaissance company with BRDM-2 vehicles, 2 tank battalions with PT-91 Twarde main battle tanks, 2 mechanized battalions with BMP-1 infantry fighting vehicles, and 1 artillery group with 2 S-1 Gvozdika 122mm self-propelled howitzers. Ukrainian troops and mechanics are already familiar with all this equipment, meaning such a formation would be extremely easy to integrate into the armed forces of Ukraine. Poland's foreign minister admitted if every European country did this, Ukraine would have several additional brigades. And he's right, now the Czech Republic is considering this idea by creating their own Ukrainian Legion following the example of Poland. Honestly, I think, if done properly, this idea of a Ukrainian Legion could low-key save Ukraine. According to Statista, by the summer of 2024, nearly 1.2 million Ukrainian refugees lived in Germany, 957,000 in Poland, 350,000 in Czechia, 245,000 in the UK, 200,000 in Spain, 170,000 in Italy, 123,000 in Moldova, and many more across Europe. If we take the top 20 countries in that list, that's roughly 5.5 million refugees. Obviously, these figures include women and children. So how many of them are males in age to fight? Well, in this article by Radio Canada, we learn how Kyiv estimates that there are 300,000 Ukrainian males in age to fight in Poland, out of 957,000 people, roughly 30% of the total number of refugees living in that country. Using the same 30% proportion for all EU countries, there would be an estimated pool of manpower of nearly 1,650,000 Ukrainian males in age to fight across Europe. This is enormous! This is 4 times the amount of Ukrainian troops sitting in trenches right now. If 1 in 10 of these guys are brave and patriotic enough to volunteer into these newly formed Ukrainian legions, this could add a staggering 165,000 military personnel to the armed forces of Ukraine. To fully man the 160 series of mechanized brigades, Ukraine would need at least 20,000 volunteers, a little over 1 in 100 males in age to fight across Europe. I repeat, they only need 1% of all these men to form an additional 10 mechanized brigades. Imagine instead of only having this one NATO-trained brigade intervening on the front, they would have an entire NATO battle corps. That would change everything. Imagine 30,000 fully equipped NATO-trained Ukrainian troops intervening all at once on the front. Anyway, I feel that all these new units that will stem from this Ukrainian Legion will just fuel the Russian paranoia of fighting NATO troops everywhere.